It's time for Comeback Sports with Brandon, the Coach Perry, and Pat, the Shot Caller Flaherty. Here we go.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Comeback Sports. That's right, a weekly sports talk show with 10 sports topics happening across the country, across the globe. I am one of your hosts, Pat, the Shot Caller Flaherty, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Brandon, the Coach Perry. Brandon, how are we doing this week, my guy?
I'm doing well, here to give the coach's call, as always. The shot caller gets the final say, which that's why you're the shot caller. But I'll tell you this, I want to give a shout out to Ricky Rubio, who went off the other night at Madison Square Garden, had, I believe, 38 or 39 points and dropped 7 3-pointers in the mecca of basketball. It was an amazing game for him.
Yeah, Rubio is definitely not known as a shooter, to say the least. So that was pretty cool to see him do that. Anytime anybody goes off at Madison Square Garden, it's just a huge event. So that's pretty cool. I'm sure the Knicks fans didn't love it, but also awesome to do that at the mecca of basketball. As always, folks, if you want to check us out, you can certainly follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are at the bottom of the screen right there. Follow us on Twitter. We tweet out links all the time to this show. Folks, also, if you love this show very much, you want to get involved in this show, you can certainly call our phone number. You can call in live right there at that number. You can also call us not when the show is on, when we're not live. Leave a voicemail. We'll play the voicemail back on the show. If you don't want to, if you're a little nervous about going on the show live, just leave a voicemail. We'll play it back. We'll answer your question. We'll talk about your comment. And as always, folks on YouTube, make sure first you give us a subscription. The subscription will help us for our show, to make our show better. It'll also feed you all of our content right to your subscription page. And finally, as you can see right there on the screen, you can jump into the live chat on YouTube as well and ask us a question there. So a lot of ways for you folks to get involved in this show. So now that we got all that done, folks, let's get going here with our 10 topics. And first up, we're going to start off with topic number 1. Topic number 1, Audi and Porsche are thinking about getting back into the F1 game. The Audi and Porsche return. There are rumors that Audi and Porsche are thinking about coming back to F1 with the new rule restrictions in F1 to start the 2022 season. Brandon, what do you think? Do you think these two teams are going to try to get it back into F1 next year?
Well, first off, good evening to Ruzaman, who I seen he commented first. We appreciate you, Ruzaman.
Love that guy.
And hey, all you new subscribers here, we appreciate you as well. But if you're not new, give us a sub here, give us a like. But this is big news, and I think this is news that has been going around the F1 world for the last few years when the regulations were talked about. And so for some new people that are maybe, not familiar with the situation, the regulation change were actually supposed to come in 2021. But due to the pandemic, a lot of things changed for obvious reasons, and they decided to delay the regulations to 2022. So that's why we've been having a great, battle here in 2021 with pretty much similar cars from the 2020 season. But with 2022 changing and the regulations changing on the cars, everything is pretty much up for grabs again for all the teams and for the constructors, which is also another reason why we're seeing Red Bull pretty much go all in this year on their car development and full investment into trying to win the title this year, because they know the regulations are changing drastically in 2022. But with those regulation changes brings the rumor that some teams might come back to the grid. And I think a lot of people have been wanting the grid to expand. Having 20 cars is amazing, but maybe having 24 or 26 cars would be a lot better. And for those people that think, maybe that doesn't happen, you go back to the earlier years of Formula One, there was 20 to 25 to 30 cars on the grid at times with multiple teams bidding for the championship. So to be able to bring other teams back into the fold, I think would be an amazing thing. And the two that keep coming up to mind and keep coming up in conversation is Porsche and Audi, mainly led by Porsche, who has already had a stint in Formula One and is possibly looking to come back. We're talking about one of the kings of motorsports. They're like one of the original motorsports teams, along with Ferrari. They go back a long, long, long way in motorsports. And we're not just talking about Formula One. We're talking about GT racing, sports car racing, a lot of things. Endurance racing. Porsche has their hands in the racing world all over the place. And then Audi is the other one, which would be technically a newcomer to the grid, I believe. And that's just one that people are bringing up because it's a big company that is possibly looking to maybe expand their brand, and doing it in Formula One, which is international, would obviously be huge. But me personally, the team that I would love to see come up more in these conversations and come back to the grid of Formula One would be BMW. BMW, such a world-class name, and has already been on the grid with a team, with a famous team in Williams. They partnered with Williams back during the early 90s. So to see if BMW could maybe come back, maybe even with Williams again, I think that would be awesome. But even if they came back and started their own team, like potentially a Porsche would do, I think that would be amazing too, getting more than 20 cars on the grid.
Yeah, I think that's a good call too. And one of the biggest reasons, like we just mentioned, for these teams, wanting to get back on the F1 circuit is because of all these rule changes are going to make it easier for the teams to get there. First, for budget constraints, and then second, for reasons like these teams want, or the new rules are going to push for electric engines. They're going to push for new synthetic fuels. So all these things are going to, I guess, sort of level the playing field. It's going to make it easier for new teams and new cars to come on the grid. And also, it's going to incentivize them to get to F1 sooner. This is sort of the time frame to do that. So I think that makes total sense for both Audi and Porsche to do that. And then, like you mentioned, if they come back onto the grid, if Porsche comes back, Audi gets there for the first time, then, like you said, you might see BMW or some of these other teams also jump back onto the circuit and try to compete because of the international, really marketing they can do with these F1 teams.
No, I agree. I think that's huge. Like you said, the marketing and building your brand. And another quick, brand that we would like to bring up would be maybe Toyota. Having Toyota come back, a Japanese brand that is huge in racing, obviously, and maybe we get to see another Japanese driver, or, with the topic that we have coming up, maybe if Yuki Tsunoda gets a little upset, maybe Toyota would like to back him in Formula One in these regulation changes. So, like I said, it might not happen in 2022, but we might see over these next couple of years, maybe 2023 or 2024, some of these teams come back to the grid. I believe we have a caller.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey guys, what's up? It's producer Ben here checking in on the hotline. Hey, I got to get the lowdown from. I want to hear it from Brandon. Is it Porsche or is it Porsche? And I need to know. I got to be saying it right when they're coming on to the grid. I'll catch up with you guys later.
Well, I honestly think that's a great question, producer Ben, the man behind the scenes, the Wizard of Oz, as I like to call him. That's a great question. I personally think that's how you pronounce it, to be honest, and maybe from the different parts of the world. Kind of like, I was even watching the F1 race this past weekend with my father, and he made the joke about how, they say garage or garage instead of garage. Yeah, so it's completely different the way you might pronounce it. And even they spell tire different. If you notice that on the F1 graphic, they spell tire with a TY. Obviously, here in America, we don't spell it like that. So it's just, I think, how you pronounce it. I personally, I'm going to say the word, but I personally like to say it as Porsche. But a lot of people do like to say Porsche, but I like to say Porsche Motorsports. So that's the answer to your question, Ben.
Yeah, I agree. I just say Porsche. Whatever you're talking about, just a Porsche sitting in a parking lot, or Porsche, whether it's in F1 racing or whatever. I just say Porsche. Maybe I'm an ignorant American. I have no idea. We do everything. We do everything different compared to everybody else. They use the metric system. We use our own measurement system. So I mean, everybody else probably says Porsche, but here in America, we say Porsche.
Yep. No, that's a good point. That brings up another reason why they have the different graphics there in during the race too, right? They have the kph for all the Europeans, and then they've got the miles per hour for us here in America, for the American fans. So you bring up a great point. But to answer your question, yeah, Ben, I think it's where you're from and how you're going to pronounce that. But yeah, like I said, seeing maybe Porsche, Audi, maybe BMW, Toyota all come back to the grid, I think could be really exciting news for F1 from this, like I said, this window of 2022 to 2024 or 25, I think is when you're going to see some of these new teams come on the grid. But let's move on to topic number 2 tonight. And topic number 2 is another good one. We're sticking with F1 here. So, hey, give us a subscribe. Give us a like here as we deliver this F1 content here from the States, specifically from Boston, Massachusetts. So I would say, this Tsunoda and Red Bull controversy that came up in the Mexican Grand Prix, where Christian Horner is pretty much wanting to blame Red Bull's problems, let's call them, in qualifying on Yuki Tsunoda and the sister team Alfa Tauri.
Yeah, I mean, when it happened, I think we're all like, what are you doing? I mean, isn't this a team? I know that it's driving is somewhat of an individual sport, but this is a team between these drivers and the engineers and everybody involved. And then all of a sudden they just talk about, oh, he got Tsunoda'd. I mean, like, what are you doing? This guy's young. He's fresh to the circuit. Like, this guy's going to be a star someday. Not quite there yet, but he will be. Like, what are you doing here? I mean, I think sometimes, Horner and some of these other guys are just afraid to criticize their top drivers, their own guys. Like, Verstappen's obviously one of the top 2 drivers on the circuit. So I think they're afraid to, like, ruffle his feathers because obviously he's got a little edge to him. Same thing with Perez, because Perez has been so good. He's actually been a good teammate too to Verstappen. But then you wait a couple of days and everybody comes out and says, actually, you know what, it wasn't Yuki's fault. Now that we really look at it, Tsunoda, should have been told by the engineers to get off the line earlier, to let those guys go by him. Perez is actually the one that made the mistake, and actually the engineers are the ones to blame here. And, I think even Dr. Marco said that Tsunoda was not at fault. So you kind of got the, holy trinity of, this is not Yuki's fault, which I think should have been the call in the first place. Like, everybody's just pissed off that happened. I think it also helps that they finished 1-3 in the race too. So that certainly softens the blow for everybody to kind of look back at the qualifying critically and see what happened. So, it sounds like it was the engineer's fault first. Then Perez kind of screwed up because he flew off the line as well, like when he shouldn't have. And then they basically said, we should have told Yuki to get off the line sooner. Yuki was just trying to be a good teammate and get out of their way. So, it just seems like, it's got to be frustrating for a talented driver like Tsunoda, who says, I'm trying to be a good teammate. I'm trying to help you guys out. It's such a weird dynamic in racing because, you want to do as well as you can as an individual driver, but you're trying to help your team by just getting out of the way, even though you're talented enough to at least finish in the top 10, win a race, so forth. So I just think it's so unselfish for some of these drivers to just get out of the way, even though I know that's the strategy. So when you have a guy like Tsunoda do something like that, and then he gets reamed out when it's clearly not his fault, I just think Red Bull's got to really take a hard look in the mirror here.
Yeah, I think that was completely uncalled for and really unfair, specifically from Christian Horner, to go ahead and call out Yuki Tsunoda, one of his young drivers who's in the Red Bull Young Drivers program and is hopefully looking to make his way up to that Red Bull team, the main team. Right now, he's driving with the sister team, Alfa Tauri, but I'm sure his main goal is to get up to that Red Bull team. So to have your team principal or even your future team principal in your eyes criticize you that hard, especially when you did make the move to get out of the way, is heartbreaking, I would imagine, for a young driver. Definitely going to shake his confidence. And this is a guy that doesn't need his confidence shaken. It's already been shaken enough with the amount of DNFs that he's had, including in this Mexican Grand Prix. He was out in the first couple of corners, unfortunately for him. So on top of having to deal with the, bad publicity and the stress, hearing that the sister team is blaming you for their qualifying, then in the race, you have a bad race and DNF and don't even have a chance to score points. So I think Yuki's had himself a rough last couple of weeks here. And if anything, he needs some support from Christian Horner and from everyone around the team to say, hey, we know you're a great driver. We know you're going to get it done. Just keep pounding away and the pace will come. It's there. But instead, he's getting criticized on live TV, saying we got Tsunoda'd. Like, what the heck was that? I really didn't appreciate it, honestly. I thought it was a bad call. And I'm telling you, I personally didn't think he did anything wrong. Even he didn't think he did anything wrong. He said, I didn't even know where else I could go and what else I could do at the time. When the engineers told him, hey, Red Bull's coming through, we need you to get off the line, it was a bad call by them. They should have delivered that information to him a lot earlier. He would have been able to speed up and get out of that section of the track and pull off to the right, which would have been a lot more serviceable for Perez and Verstappen coming through. Unfortunately, they delay that information getting to him, and he obviously is serving a engine penalty. So that was another reason people were saying that he shouldn't even have been in there. He was there to help his teammate, Pierre Gasly, get a tow in that part of qualifying. So he was doing his job as a teammate, honestly. He had every right to be there. He didn't have to serve his penalty until race day. So they needed to deliver that information to him a lot faster so he could get out of the way. And then personally, I think Sergio Perez made the bigger mistake. Obviously, he saw that Yuki was off track. He was kicking up a lot of dust. And that drew his eye to Yuki, maybe not knowing where Yuki was going to take his car. At that point, Sergio has to trust that Yuki Tsunoda knows what's going on, that his team told him to get out of the way. That information came from Red Bull to get out of the way, by the way, and stick it in there, man. Just stick it in the corner and stay committed to your lap. Unfortunately, Perez bails on his lap, which I get it. To me, that is a 50-50. He bails on his lap, thinking that maybe Yuki's going to come back onto the track. Then here comes Verstappen coming through, and if it wasn't a double yellow, it possibly should have been. With two cars off track that close, Verstappen has to let off the gas. That ruins his lap. But nobody has any right to blame Yuki Tsunoda for any of that. The people that need to be looking in the mirror and blaming themselves is Red Bull, Christian Horner. You needed to deliver that information to the sister team a lot earlier, and their engineers needed to deliver that information to Yuki a lot earlier. So I tweeted out quickly after this that Honda needs to take notice of how Red Bull is pretty much treating Yuki Tsunoda, their young up-and-coming driver, and especially in Honda's eyes, their next king of F1 in their eyes. So Honda, take notice of Red Bull's incompetence when they're dealing with Yuki Tsunoda. Did we lose Pat? Oh, we might have lost Pat. Lost the shot caller, so that's all right. Well, I'll fill some time. Kudo, can you throw me up on the one cam there? Till we get the shot caller back? Get Ruserman Reese in this as our other co-hosts. But unfortunately, we just lost the shot caller, Pat Flaherty, right there. And this is a live show. So, we do occasionally have technical difficulties, and this is one of them. And it happened, on the second part of the show. He said he's going to try to, his laptop just shut off on him. He's going to try to get it back on. So we should have him back here in a few minutes. Until then, we're going to just cover here and talk a little bit more F1, if that's all right with you, producer Ben. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Tsunoda Red Bull situation at Mexico, honestly, because I personally think it's one of those things where they shouldn't have been complaining, especially when they know they have the best car on the grid. They knew that they were going to still win the race and go ahead and potentially get a P1 and P2 in the race. If it wasn't for the superb driving of Lewis Hamilton, pretty much all race holding off Sergio Perez, Red Bull would have had a guaranteed P1 and P2. Verstappen looked like he had a rocket up his butt at the Mexican Grand Prix. At times was 7 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who was in second place. So it was just really one of those things where I think Red Bull had nothing to complain about. What they really should have done is admitted that they were the ones to blame, that they didn't get the information to Alfa Tauri quick enough or to Yuki quick enough, suck up the qualifying and just, head down and get ready for the race on Sunday. I think that's something that they maybe will learn, because they've received a lot of bad press from this and the way that they handled Yuki Tsunoda. And that could also be the reason why they backtracked so fast over these last few days, and with Dr. Helmut Marko coming out and saying that they didn't blame Yuki and that Yuki was not at fault. But I don't know. I think that's all, like I said, backtracking. And I think they really need to look in the mirror for what their qualifying performance was. And that was on them. But they knew in the race they were going to have a quick car and they were going to be able to win the race, even from coming from where they were on the grid, which I believe was 3 and 4. It might have been 4 and 5, but I believe it was 3 and 4. So it's really one of those things where Red Bull, sometimes, I don't know, man, you complain about a lot. It's like the boy crying wolf. when they know they still have the best car on the grid, and it has been the best car all season long, with Max Verstappen leading over 500 laps of this F1 season. Lewis Hamilton is the next leader in laps, and I believe he's only in the 150 laps led. So that is crazy when we're talking about the gap in laps led there and the actual competition gap in the field. But it looks like we got the shot caller back here. We might just have to reshuffle some screens. So I'm going to come back and we're going to let, we're going to let shot caller. You might have to fill in here and we're going to reshuffle screens as I come back into the fold.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. I had personally some technical difficulties here. It is a GD mess here in my little studio, or whatever you want to call it, the bedroom that I'm in right now, to try to get this show going again. So I apologize to everybody across the board. I'm going to get this fixed. Hey, we're back up and running. That was so quick. That's because producer Ben is unbelievable, making the magic happen behind the scenes right there. And we're still on topic number 2 because Brandon was crushing it for so long. So why don't we finish up and say that this is it for topic number 2, because Brandon, the Coach Perry, is the guy you want to talk to when it comes to F1. So that's going to do it for topic number 2 here on Comeback Sports. That went so much better than I thought it was gonna. Moving on to topic number 3. We're sticking with F1, folks. Sebastian Vettel not happy about what's going on with his team as they've sort of struggled to pick up wins. He keeps saying, top 10s are great for midfield cars, but not for us. We need to do a better job. We need to get podiums. We need to get wins, Brandon. Vettel, a 4-time champion. This guy is not used to just being average. This is why these drivers are so good. This is the mentality that he has. Verstappen, obviously Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez. This is why these guys are in the top 5 almost every week. So when Vettel doesn't get to the podium or doesn't get to the top 5, he's upset about it. Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, these Formula One drivers are just like any other top athlete in their game. They're type A personalities. They want to win. They want to be the best. They want to show that they have everything it takes to be the best. And we're talking about, like you said, a 4-time F1 world champion, Sebastian Vettel. And he, I think, deserves every right to be in a car that can fight at the front. And I think he's just voicing his opinion right now. So hopefully Aston Martin will get hardworking in the factory to basically deliver that car in 2022 when the regulations change. Because this year, at times, they have just been, I want to say, a joke at times, to be honest. They haven't had the pace. I believe there was only a few races, and they were mainly early in the season, where Aston Martin was showing great pace. And, Sebastian Vettel was obviously up there in the Hungary race after that huge debacle in turn 1 with Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull. So he was there to pounce and take on that. So it shows he's still got it left. He's still one of the best drivers on the grid, in my opinion. I would love to see this guy in a car that can compete for wins. I think we're looking at a Formula One world champion that's been competing in the midfield, and then watching Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen race in arguably one of the most exciting title battles we've seen over the last few decades. And he's like, man, I want to be in that battle. And I know I have the talent to be able to do it. I just need equipment in a car that is going to bring me up there to battle with these guys. And I agree with him. I honestly think he does have the talent to be able to battle with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Another guy is obviously Fernando Alonso. I think if you give him a better car, he'd be right up there. Another Formula One world champion that would be up there battling with these guys. That's what we're hoping to see in 2022 with the regulation changes, cars that will be able to follow each other a lot closer, a lot easier without the quote unquote dirty air, so we can have closer racing and maybe more overtakes and maybe closer battling. And another reason, you talked about it earlier in the thing, is, so some of these smaller teams with smaller funds like Aston Martin can have a chance to bring themselves to the top of the grid to fight with Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. So I think this is an exciting time. But, Sebastian Vettel is just voicing his opinion and saying you need to get hard at work right now and maybe even deliver this car a little bit better over these last 5 Grand Prix that we have, so we can have a fighting chance and have some great momentum carrying us into the offseason, so we can really work hard on developing this 2022 car, so we can fight for the wins next year and get back to the front And I'm telling you, this guy has what it takes to get back to the front. Remember, he's coming off of racing with Red Bull, winning his 4 championships there. Then he moves on to Ferrari, has a great showing there. Obviously doesn't win the titles that he wants to with Ferrari, but still has an amazing showing and is in the title battles with Lewis Hamilton for the next 4 or 5 years when he joined Ferrari. So he wants to get back into that title fight. Right now, he's saying racing for midfield points is not gratifying. He wants to be fighting for those wins. I understand, and I back him. Sebastian Vettel, you deserve a car that can fight for wins.
Yeah, first off, with Vettel, too, he's got so much experience. He's a 4-time champ. He's got 53 wins on the circuit. I mean, when you're sort of later in your career, too, you just don't care about the little victories. Like you said, the midfield points. Like when you've been a champion that many times, and you're sort of towards the end of your career, and you want to finish it off, in the style, you don't care about the little victories. So I totally understand where he's coming from. I think you mentioned it too, Brandon, where he understands they're not going to be fighting for anything at the end of this season. But he's saying right now, Aston Martin and him and everybody else involved in the team needs to really get in gear for next year. This is sort of like how they build momentum into next season. So, when they have the new restrictions on budget, which I think it's going down to 145 million or something like that, and then it's dropping down to 135 a year or two later. And some of the other restrictions with the engines and with the cars and everything, they think it's going to level off the playing field, which makes sense. And again, he wants, the teams to get working on it now. One thing you got to remember with some of these teams too, though, I mean, setting Mercedes and Red Bull aside, the rest of the teams are saying, well, next year, these new restrictions are going to kind of level the playing field. Yeah, it will, but all the other teams are going to it's going to level the playing field for all the other teams too. So you're not necessarily going to be a better team across the board. You just might be a little closer to Mercedes and Red Bull, but you've got, 3 or 4 other teams that are going to have just as good of a chance as you are because their playing field is leveled as well. So, one thing is this, like you mentioned, the competition is going to be better. There's going to be more battles. There's going to be more, drivers trying to get by each other during all these races. But in the other hand, like all these teams that are gearing up for next year, you're not necessarily going to be building all these wins because everybody else is going to be in a very similar position as you are. So while it is going to level the playing field, I don't see another team surging up. So, all these teams have a lot of work to do to get to a good year next year in 2022. But like I said, like you said, like Vettel just has that mindset. That's why they signed him to be at Aston Martin. They need somebody who, we talked about how Tom Brady, as soon as he got to Tampa Bay, they won the NFC Championship. A player from Tampa Bay, a young guy, was crying in the locker room. Brady said, "Stop crying. We have another game." Meaning, like, I have 6 rings. I'm not satisfied. So neither should you, who you don't have any rings. So I think that's what Vettel's kind of saying to this Aston Martin team. Like, listen, I've done this 4 times, and I still want to do this. I still want to be getting podiums and getting up to the top. So let's put our, for lack of a better term, let's put the pedal to the metal here and try to do a better job.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good call. He's just trying to motivate this team now so we can get working on it and deliver for them. And like you said, the regulations are going to bring teams closer together, but that doesn't guarantee you anything. You have to work hard now because other teams are going to be working hard on those regulations and trying to develop their car to be different from yours to basically accelerate themselves in the fight next year. So if you're not doing that right now, you will be left behind in that battle, in that development fight that is going to start in 2022. And he's just saying, hey, I want to be in the fight. I've got the experience. I've got the talent to be able to fight with these guys up front. You just have to give me a car to do it. And I completely agree with him. So, hey, let's move on to topic number 4. Topic number 4 is Canelo Alvarez is now the middleweight king. This guy unified all the middleweight belts with his 11th round knockout of Caleb Plant just this past weekend. An impressive fight as well.
Yeah, Canelo, even though the fight went 11 rounds, 11 out of 12, he knocked him out in the 11th round. Canelo was in control of this fight the entire time. So I think it's more about just talking about what does this mean for boxing. Canelo is obviously, some folks think he's the best pound per pound fighter, in boxing right now. Certainly entertaining, knocks guys out, goes the distance a lot. So I think, Canelo is good for the sport of boxing. It's funny though, when you see, he's the undisputed middleweight champ because he's got the 4 belts. It's almost just crazy that there's now 4 belts. Now, so if you go back and look at, other undisputed champs, it's a lot of them are heavyweight. So it's, it's Muhammad Ali, it's Mike Tyson, it's, Evander Holyfield, it's Lennox Lewis, going way back to Rocky Marciano, Brockton's own. And then more recently, Roy Jones Jr., who was I think he was a light heavyweight undisputed champ, but also won the heavyweight title, later on in his career as well. But, you've got 4 belts now. It's so crazy because some of these other fights, when boxing in its heyday was probably, from 67 to 83, they just had the 2. They had WBA and WBC. And that was boxing's heyday. 60s to like late 80s was just, everybody loved boxing. It meant something to be the heavyweight champ. It meant something to be the middleweight champ. You had Ali, Frazier. You had, all the middleweights with Marvin Hagler, who we just lost a few months ago. You had all these great fighters in that time frame, and he just had 2 belts. Now you have 4, and it's almost like, and it's a kind of a cool picture when Canelo's got the 4 belts, but you're like, this is kind of getting ridiculous that you have all these different belts. So, on the one hand, I think Canelo is a phenomenal fighter. He's going to go down as a top 20 fighter probably ever. And I'm sure he's got more to do too. I mean, a lot of people are asking now for a 3rd fight, a trilogy fight with Triple G. But, I just keep being reminded of, is this where boxing is going, where you have 4 belts that you have to worry, almost, kind of think about when you've got one of these title fights going on?
Well, hey, here's a couple of other names for you from the heyday of boxing: Sugar Ray Leonard, Deron, Hagler, Hearns. Like you said, those were really the best years of boxing, man. Everybody loved watching them. And I think boxing actually fell off for a while. It's now starting to try to make its way back, with the likes of, first with Floyd Mayweather trying to push hard with his promotion. Then you had, you bring up Canelo, you have Triple G. You've got the young Ryan Garcia now, who's a great up-and-coming champion. So there are some new champions. You got Gervonta Davis, the Tank Davis. There's some young new guys that are trying to bring the life back into boxing. Canelo Alvarez is crazy. He's been around for so long that he's still young. He's still one of those young guys. But like I said, he's been around for a long, long time now. I think going back to when he lost to Floyd Mayweather, that seems like it was like decades ago now. It was so long ago now that he's become such a better fighter since then. He's had a whole new career since then, to be honest, and he's been dominant since then. This guy, I believe, is 57-1 now at this point, and really dominated that fight with Caleb Plant and showed that he is the middleweight king right now. And like you said, I mean, he had 4 belts. He couldn't even hold them all at one point. They needed to take a few minutes to figure out how he was going to hold all the belts before they could even take those pictures, man. It was crazy. And so that was the joke going around, but that's a hell of a thing. That's a first world problem to have when you have all the 4 world championship belts around your neck and you're trying to figure out how to hold them. I think, to answer your question, it comes down to the moolah, the greenery, the money, baby. The more championships there are, the more fights there are, the more pay-per-view there is, the more greenery there is to dish out. And so I think that's why you have the 4 world titles now. But it's hard to be able to unify them and get all 4 of them together. This guy has done it. And like I said, not the first to be able to unify a weight division, but most recently one to do it in dominating fashion most recently. And Canelo Alvarez is a great champion, in my opinion. I did get upset when he ducked Triple G for a few years there, knowing that Triple G was in his prime, was much older than him, and that if he waited a few more years, Triple G would kind of lose a little bit of steam. That's when he fought Triple G and beat him at that point. So I quickly have to bring that up, how he was ducking Triple G for a few years because he did not want to fight that guy, knowing that he could possibly get another L, and that would derail his career probably for good. And hey, smart move when you look at it now, right? But people are still going to bring it up that you ducked him for a few years. So I think that's why people are also calling for maybe to have that third fight come up with these guys and have the trilogy fight between Triple G and Canelo Alvarez. I love both fighters. I think they're both excellent. So I think that would be a great fight to have. But just quickly before I pass it back, we were just covering the Mexican Grand Prix and how Sergio Perez is such a superstar there in the country of Mexico. Honestly, they treat him like a god. They treat Canelo Alvarez in that same light. I'd be really wondering who's the bigger superstar in Mexico. Is it Canelo Alvarez or is it Sergio Perez? I've got to go with Sergio Perez, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think now being an F1 driver probably carries a little more prestige, even though Canelo is now the undisputed middleweight champ. But yeah, I think you're probably right. I think it's Perez. I just think there's more marketing opportunities for F1 drivers. There's just so much more that they're exposed to so much more as compared to boxing now. But yeah, I mean, you go back to his first fight with Triple G, like you were talking about too. The first fight was a split decision, and a lot of people thought it was a controversial split decision. A lot of folks thought that Triple G should have won that one. I think it was 2017. They come back in 2018. Again, they go. I think they went the distance, but Canelo won. In the decision there, and everyone agreed that that was the correct decision. But it's one of those fight series that there's been some controversy. So we, to see a third fight between these guys, I think would be a big ticket item for a lot of boxing fans. I mean, right now Canelo, he's 31, so like you said, still sort of in his prime as a fighter. I can't remember how old Triple G is, but he's definitely older than 31, like you mentioned. So they got to make that fight happen soon, if it's going to happen at all, because you just don't know how much longer Triple G is going to be around. Because a lot of folks would want Canelo to fight Floyd Mayweather again, but Mayweather's probably done. So it's just not going to happen. So you want to that's two. The best fights are between two of the greatest fighters, in contrasting styles and all that kind of thing. So if you want another huge payday, another great fight, you have those two guys fight in a rematch for the third time. I think that would be huge. We saw it with Fury and Wilder in the heavyweights, for the third time in their triple match there, and hopefully we see it with Canelo and Triple G. And that's going to do it for topic number 4. We're going to move on to topic number 5 now, and we're sticking with boxing, but we have two athletes from two completely other sports that are going to go at it. And we just talked about the popularity of boxing. Yep. It's crazy to say, but one of the things that's helping boxing kind of come back a little are these weird fights. I mean, Jake Paul fighting, certain fighters, and even guys like Manute Bol coming out and fighting people, and Nate Robinson. People are tuning into this stuff, especially young kids. So I think this is going to be another one of those fights where you have Deron Williams, former NBA player, last played in the NBA, I believe, in 2017. Frank Gore, who was just in the NFL last year playing for the Jets. Maybe that's why he decided to go to boxing after a year with the Jets. But, he said he's been training to be both a fighter and a football player for months now, but he's now really concentrating on boxing. This is going to be a lot of fun, Brandon. What do you think about this fight between Deron Williams and Frank Gore?
I think you're right. I think these celebrity boxing matches are good for boxing, honestly. I mean, people like them, especially here in 2021. I believe Lamar Odom just put the smackdown on somebody just a few months ago in like a celebrity boxing match. I forgot who it was. But yeah, I think these are good for boxing. They're certainly entertaining. I'm a little shocked by this matchup. I'm not going to lie. I like Deron Williams. I'm a big Deron Williams fan. I think he had a great NBA career, great point guard that could score, light it up, man, and could distribute well. I loved his game in the NBA, but he didn't come off as like one of the toughest guys in the NBA during his time frame. I didn't see him starting many beefs or trying to even throw blows on the court. So I'm not expecting him to throw many good blows now when they get into the ring. And I know that's crazy, but you got Frank Gore, who, I mean, he looks like he's still in his 25 or 27. It's crazy. The guy played in the NFL for so long, is in, I believe, the top 5 in rushing yards, or top 10, I believe.
I think he's 4th. Yards. I actually think he's 4th, which is nuts.
Because he has been in the NFL for so long. You have to mention him as one of the best running backs of all time, just based off of how many carries and yards he's got and the durability that he's had in one of the hardest games to keep yourself available in. This guy was available all year long as a running back. And I mean, this is, like I said, that proves he's one of the toughest guys in probably NFL history, right? And so I think that he is going to mop the floor personally with Deron Williams. I think this is going to be a quick fight. I think especially he's delivering some power. If this is Frank we're watching right now on the left. Look at those arms. So Deron Williams, I've got some advice for you. Keep moving. Keep the ring moving for this guy. If you keep yourself stationary and try to get into a boxing or a slug match with this guy, he's going to knock you out, man. He's going to deliver a punch. I believe in Frank Gore. This is a tough guy. I believe in all running backs. I'm a former running back myself. We go through hell going up the middle. And so I'll tell you what, this guy is going to go in there with no fear. He's going to knock out Deron Williams, and it's going to have himself a great day after that.
Very interesting. I'm going to disagree with you, and here's why. Even though I love Frank Gore, I think he's tough as nails. When you are running back in the NFL for that long, you got to be a tough guy, and I think Gore is. He had that. I think he tore his ACL when he was at the University of Miami, which actually led the way for Willis McGahee to become a great running back at Miami. Gore is probably going to go to the Hall of Fame in the NFL just because of where he is on the career rushing list, and he was so good when he was with the 49ers and even a few teams after that. Frank Gore is 5'9". Deron Williams is 6'3". And, I think the weight limit is like 215 or something like that, which they're both going to be able to get there. It's not going to be, I don't think either of them are going to have a problem, even though I don't know what Deron Williams looks like right now. But here's a couple of things with Williams. Along with his height, 6'3", so he's obviously got a bigger reach. So that's going to help him in the fight. Number 2, he owns an MMA gym. So I got to think he's worked out there. Number 3, he wrestled when he was younger. He wrestled and played basketball, I believe, when he was in middle school and high school. And I guess he boxes too. I think I didn't even know this till today, but Williams has a fighting background, like a sport fighting background. So I just think he has more experience in a ring. I think he's got the reach. They're both great athletes. If anybody's seen any of them, the thing that Gore has is I think he's probably going to be a little bit stronger. And he's been closer to his professional sport. He still hasn't retired from the NFL, even though he's not playing so far this year. So he's still in like NFL shape, whereas Williams, who knows what shape he's in. Even if he's kind of working out at a gym, he's not really in like playing or fighting shape necessarily. So that'll probably be the one advantage that Gore has. But I'm going to take Williams with that reach and that fighting background.
I'll tell you what, to counter that, all right? You got me on that one. You definitely got me on the reach, especially, and that's a boxing one. You bring up a great point. But I'll tell you what, my fighter, like I said, he's built like Gervonta Tank Davis. He's going to be able to eat some punches and come in close, and I think deliver that big punch that's going to be the deciding one. So I guess it's my thing is who can take the punch more? Is it Deron Williams or Frank Gore? I just feel like Frank Gore can eat a few more punches more than Deron Williams. But this is going to be an entertaining matchup. We might have to cover it again next week. But let's move on to topic number 6. The dogs have their way. And I'm not even sure what we're talking about with this one. And what was the topic here with this one? I forgot what this was.
So I think it was the dogs have their day, like every dog has their day. A lot of underdogs won on Sunday in the NFL. And it was just kind of like some of these were so unexpected. So I think the question you have to ask is, which one was the biggest surprise to you? I mean, for me, you could talk about, we keep saying, the Bengals have to grow up and learn how to win. Well, they didn't do that this past week. They were favored against the Browns because the Browns, waived Odell Beckham Jr., Kareem Hunt's still out. They weren't certainly not at full strength. Baker Mayfield's been banged up. And they killed the Bengals 41-16. I mean, they dominated the Bengals. Then you look at, the Bills lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yep.
Talk about an underdog having their day. Just a gross 9-6 game between the two teams, no touchdowns. You hate to see it there. Atlanta beat New Orleans 27-25. I don't know why New Orleans was a favorite when they have no idea what's going on at their quarterback position. But anyway, Atlanta won that one 27-25. I think the biggest upset of the day, however, was the Cowboys and the Broncos. The Broncos dominated the Cowboys. I couldn't believe it. I mean, Denver is just an average team at best. You know, Teddy Bridgewater, who I like and respect and everything he's been through as a football player, is just an average quarterback at best. They just traded Von Miller, so he didn't even play on Sunday because he was already with the Rams. And Denver still looked like they had Von Miller on their team because they kept sacking Dak Prescott and pressuring Dak Prescott. They ended up beating the Cowboys 30-16. I mean, just a dominating performance by the Broncos. And you're thinking Dallas is going to be a Super Bowl contender. This is now their second loss of the season, and they'll be fine in the standings and things like that. But they didn't look like that dominant NFL team that we saw earlier in the year, beat the Patriots in overtime and have some big wins to start the season.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great choice. And just quickly to show you how that is a great choice and back up your comments a little bit more. When Von Miller got traded, he said, I went to bed and I was 4-4. I got up and I was 7-1. So it just tells you that he even thought he was on a mediocre team at that point, and now he's so happy to be on a contending team. So for the Broncos to come out on Sunday and to beat the Cowboys, a team that a lot of people are saying should be competing for the NFC Championship, which there's a lot of good teams in the NFC, but the Cowboys have been brought into that conversation. I do think that was a major upset, but I've got to go with an even bigger upset, and that is that Jacksonville Jaguars team beating the Buffalo Bills. Because we're talking about in the AFC, the race maybe being a little tighter and a little smaller with less teams. And the Buffalo Bills were one of those teams that people were picking to at least go for the AFC Championship game. And now you've arguably lost to one of the worst teams in the NFL. Your offense looked completely stagnant. Your quarterback couldn't do anything. And that's arguably the best part of Buffalo's team, right? Is their passing game with Josh Allen and Diggs. They really could not get it going at all on Sunday. So I really think that's the bigger news here is how the Buffalo Bills really just, trudged through the mud and got nothing done against one of the worst teams in the NFL. And Jacksonville Jaguars managed to pull out a win. And it's one of those things where I wonder if the Buffalo Bills went into that game thinking, this is a walk. We're going to be able to dominate them. And then this is one of those things that proves on any given Sunday in professional sports, if you don't show up ready to go, you will get your doors blown off.
Yeah, no question. That would probably be the other candidate there is that Bills game. The other thing with the Bills, too, I mean, we hate to be homers here, but don't look behind you. The Patriots are now 5-4. So you can't sort of let up here. The Bills still have the Jets on their schedule twice. So those should be 2 wins there, but you thought that too with the Jaguars. So, we'll see what happens down the stretch. The next couple of weeks are going to be tough for the Patriots. They're playing some good teams. But, Buffalo hasn't shut the door in the AFC East just yet, and they have to play the Patriots twice now. And I think, if I'm going to make a prediction right now, I think they're going to split those 2 games, and then, you will see how they do down the stretch. But, I think the Cowboys, just watching the game, I was like, this is just a different team. They don't have Tyron Smith, who's their massive left tackle. That certainly hurt them against Denver, and you're really seeing the effects of that. We'll see how soon he can get back with the Cowboys. They ran the ball a little bit, but they were, just to start, I think they were down 16-0 very early, and it was like they didn't have a chance to really run the ball enough because you're down by a couple touchdowns. You got to throw the ball a lot. So they were kind of forced into throwing it a ton. So they're getting Michael Gallup back this week, I believe. So that'll certainly help their passing game. You add a little more speed to the edge to go along with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, who's already 2 stud receivers. So, we'll see what Dallas can do here. But that's pretty crazy that Denver could pull that one off in such a dominating fashion with Dallas at home. So, pretty nuts there as the Dogs had their day over the weekend. And folks, that's going to do it for topic number 6. Moving on to topic number 7, we're going to stay in the NFL, and Cooper Kupp has just been lighting the world on fire this year for the Rams. He is now the only other receiver other than Jerry Rice to have 10 touchdown catches and 1,000 yards in the first 9 games of the season. That's a hell of a season for a lot of receivers. Never mind for the first 9 games, Brandon. Cooper Kupp's been unreal.
I'm back. I think I'm back. All right, hold on.
Brandon's got some issues here with his video, so we're going to see if we can get that fixed. Of course, I set the tone for this as I messed up my computer earlier in the show. But we talk about Cooper Kupp. You think of dominant receivers in the NFL, and you think about DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones back in his prime, and some of these other receivers like an Odell Beckham Jr. who can go up and catch the ball in traffic. Cooper Kupp hasn't necessarily been that guy. I don't think we've thought of him as a dominant receiver, but Cooper Kupp has been that dominant receiver this year. I know, having Matt Stafford on the Rams has certainly helped that, but this guy, we've never really thought of him as one of the top receivers in the league. We have to now, though, Brandon.
Yep, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with Skype tonight. They're not liking Comeback Sports. And on that last topic, I honestly, George has been so dominant. When I saw the word dogs, I thought we were going to be talking about Georgia football. I forgot about that. But hey, man, Cooper Kupp has been so dominant this year. I am absolutely loving it. He's on my fantasy team, man. My fantasy team is stacked with receivers. I've got Kupp, Devontae Adams. I've got Jamar Chase. I've got Julio Jones. Like my team is absolutely stacked. I'm absolutely loving Cooper Kupp. He's just a plug and play guy. You just forget about him at this point. 25 plus points. He has been absolutely tearing it up on a historic season right now. And like you said, this is a guy that you definitely have to put him up there with, I think, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now. He's clearly showing that. Like you said, for years, he's probably flown under the radar. But this guy has been one of those guys, one of the best route runners in the NFL. And along with Devontae Adams. So they're always open because they know exactly how to get themselves open. Great with body control, great with hands. This guy is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and now everybody is finally starting to catch on and see it because he's putting up historic numbers with Matt Stafford coming in. And I'm telling you what, historic numbers when you're only in the only other guy that's in the same category with you is Jerry Rice, the great Jerry Rice, who is arguably the greatest wide receiver of all time. When you put yourself in a conversation with Jerry Rice, you are doing amazing things. Over these first, I believe, 10 games, he's got like 10 touchdowns, almost 1,000 receiving yards. He is absolutely lighting it up. And to me, I am not shocked at all. I love this guy. He's a great personality off the field as well. I think like somebody that if you want to look for somebody to follow, you should definitely follow Cooper Kupp. And if you're a young football player, you should watch this guy and learn from him. Because like I said, one of the best route runners in the NFL. And I'm telling you right now, everybody's finally catching on that he's one of the best players in the NFL as well.
No question. I think, you mentioned Devontae Adams, and I think a lot of people think of Devontae Adams as a number one receiver, as a top 3 or even 5 guy in the NFL because he's such a great route runner, because he has the size and speed, but also you can kind of throw the ball up there and he can go get it. Whereas I don't think you think of Cooper that same way, but we probably should. The way that he can almost do anything out on the field right now too. And you talk about Adams and Cooper Kupp too. Not the most heralded college receivers coming out for the NFL draft. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, everybody knew was going to be good. Julio Jones was a top pick. AJ Green, when he was in his prime back with the Bengals, was one of those guys. These two guys weren't. I think Cooper Kupp was a 3rd round pick. Can't remember what round Devontae Adams was taken. He seemed to come out of nowhere for the Packers. So, these two guys, unheralded receivers, clearly worked incredibly hard to get to where they are. And now you're seeing them. They're probably the 2 best receivers in the NFL. If you think about it, Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, with Julio Jones kind of drifting back because he's getting a little older. He's a little banged up. DeAndre Hopkins kind of hasn't been exactly the same guy, although he'll probably go out and have a massive game this week for the Cardinals. But I think those 2 guys are probably the 2 top receivers right now.
Yeah, I think you do have to put D-Hop in there. If he watches this show, he will definitely tweet at us that he's still one of the best wide receivers. He's got the confidence like that. And I think, like we were just talking about earlier in the show, professional athletes are that type A personality. They have the most confidence in the world. And I love it. But I think those other 2 guys, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, are arguably up there. And Cooper Kupp has really been displaying his talent this season in the NFL. But let's move on tonight to a big topic number 8. And this was going to be the OBJ signing because we thought OBJ would be signed by now, but he's still a free agent. at the moment. So we're shocked on this one. I'm sure a lot of other people are shocked, but I'm telling you right now, I guess he's really deciding what's his best move and who he really wants to go play for now that he's passed waivers and became a free agent.
Yeah, and let me tell you, sports Twitter and has just been, handcuffed by this whole thing, because every other hour it sounds like, especially because we follow, I'm sure you do too, Brandon. We follow a lot of the local, Patriots beat writers, because the Patriots are in on them, and everybody says, oh, the Patriots are in. Now the Patriots aren't in. Now the Patriots are in again. Oh, the Packers are very much in on him. Oh, they only offered him a veteran minimum. The Saints are in there, but the Saints don't have a quarterback. He wants to play with a good quarterback. I mean, like, everybody's reporting on this has just been like all over the place. I think because there's not a lot of content right now, because people are sick of talking about Aaron Rodgers not being vaccinated. They want something else going on. So, the trade deadline's coming past, and now this is the big topic. So if OBJ wants to play with a great quarterback, you got to think the Packers, Seattle, and Buffalo. I heard it might be kind of a mystery team that might be involved in this. That would probably be the three top teams that he would probably want to go to, because it's not really going to be about the money. I don't think he's going to get a huge deal from any of these teams. A team like the Patriots can only offer him like maybe $3 million, if that. So if he wants to go to a place that has a great quarterback, I'd say those are the top three spots. The Patriots aren't a bad spot, though, because I think if the Patriots do sign him, I think it's more for next year than this year. And I think what they would do is sign him to, a contract for the rest of the season, try to fit him under the salary cap space that they have right now, and then try him out. He wouldn't play on Sunday against the Browns. I just think it wouldn't be enough time. Although he's a player, we can kind of just throw him out there and chuck him the ball. But, we'll see if, first of all, they got to sign him. And then you try him out for the rest of the season, see if he gels with Mac Jones, see if he kind of fits under the Belichick player, Patriot. I hate saying Patriot way because it's just been talked about so much, but sort of fits with the Patriots. And then you might think about signing him to a longer deal, a 2-3 year deal. The other thing with the Patriots, too, is so I think the Patriots are saying, I know you want to play with a great quarterback. We think we have a great quarterback here in Mac Jones, or at least a really good one, who's going to be around for a while. If you go to the Packers, it's probably just going to be this year, then Rodgers is walking. If you go to Seattle, it might just be this year, and then Wilson might walk. We'll see. He's also coming back from an injury. So, and then if you go to Buffalo, that's probably the one place that's probably the most stable. So, OBJ clearly has a relationship with Bill Belichick. And I think Mac Jones has such a command of the offense that I've kind of flipped the script on this. I've said, I don't think OBJ should go to the Pats. I don't think they should go after him. I think they're now set up to do that. I think they're in a good place now where they can bring him in. He's not going to, do too much to change what they're trying to do. This is sort of like a cheap deal where they can, cut bait at the end of the year if they have to. If I'm the Pats, I try this. But if I'm OBJ, I'm probably thinking about going to one of those other teams that has a veteran quarterback where we can win probably this year.
Yeah, I think everybody's just going to sign him for a contract for the rest of the season and see what he can do before they're going to commit to him long term over the next few years. So I think that's what every team is going to be looking to do. So he's really taking his time to see who can offer the most money over these final games of the season, but also what's going to be the best fit for him now and going forward. And it's a nice problem to have when you clear waivers and don't have to be worried about picking up by a bad team. He clearly said, I want to go somewhere where I can win. So if a bad team picks me up, there's going to be problems, quote unquote. So clearly all the teams said, well, we're passing on him through waivers now, and he's going to be a free agent, but that's great for him. That was great marketing by him and his agent to be able to basically weasel their way into free agency. So now he can go anywhere he wants. And I totally get it. I love the move. So now he's got the chance to go wherever he wants. Let's bring up those teams. Now, I'm 50-50 on if he's going to go to the Patriots. I do think it makes sense for the Patriots to go after him. He would clearly be the number one wide receiver, could come in and I think gel well with a Nelson Aguilar and, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I do think it would be a nice complement to an offense that needs a deep threat and hasn't had a deep threat since Randy Moss. So that is a long time ago. So I do think it makes sense. And like I said, the Patriots also have the money to be able to accommodate it as well. And that is a huge thing as well for OBJ, I would imagine. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to pick the Patriots. What I think is more logical to happen is some teams that you brought up that I didn't even think of. You know, the Buffalo Bills, the Seattle Seahawks, I think are some great choices to think of. Obviously, Buffalo, like we said, having Diggs there to be able to go opposite of Diggs, having a great quarterback and a young quarterback in Allen that could be set up for the next few years would make sense. They are definitely in the picture for the AFC Championship, a team that is winning right now, even though they did just lose to the worst team in the NFL. I still do think that is a decent choice. Seattle, obviously, everybody wants to go play with Russell Wilson. I don't blame him. He still is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, one of the best leaders in the NFL, which I think doesn't go mentioned enough. So this is a great guy, a character guy that I think could help Odell Beckham on and off the field. I think that's a great relationship that they could have over there. And then another great receiver he'd go opposite of is DK Metcalf. So I think that would be a great choice. But here's one that I think not a lot of people are bringing it up, and maybe it's because they've invested so much already with draft picks and trading this year, but a team that we just talked about, Cooper Kupp's team, the Los Angeles Rams, I think would be an amazing choice for Odell Beckham Jr. You now would have Odell Beckham Jr., Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods on a team with Matthew Stafford that loves to air it out, with one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL, with Sean McVay, a team that is winning right now and is in the hunt for the championship. I think if Odell Beckham Jr. could work out the money and the contract with Los Angeles, and even some, because they still got to be able to work it out long term. He doesn't just want to go there for the rest of the season. So they've got to be able to work out the money. But I think that is a great team that I don't think a lot of people are bringing it up, but it could be because of the money and maybe their constraints in the cap.
Yeah, that's a scary thought to think of. Beckham, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods would probably catch 150 balls because like they'd be playing two deep safeties and there'd be no help underneath, and Woods would be catching, 7-8 yard digs all game. That would be pretty unbelievable. One more team too to think about. Everybody's throwing dirt on them right now, but I'm not going to because of the skill position players they have. The Chiefs are going to be in on them too. The Chiefs are going to be one of those teams that they could be in on. Because who doesn't want to play with Pat Mahomes, even though he's not having a great year. Things can flip a switch in Kansas City very quickly because of the talent they have and the coaching staff they have. So they're certainly a team that I think will be in the mix as well. I mean, they could be making the decision right now too. So we'll see what happens in the next 24 hours. But Odell seems to be kind of taking his time too. So it might take a week, who knows. But it's going to be interesting to follow over the next 24 to 48 hours in the NFL. Folks, that's going to do it for topic number 8. Moving on to topic number 9, we're going to head to baseball. Even though the World Series is over, Atlanta Braves won the title. Now all the postseason awards are coming out. And is Shohei Ohtani a shoo-in? Is Shohei definitely going to be the MVP of the American League brand? What do you think?
Well, we all know my vote, and it's for superstar Shohei Ohtani, Showtime, the man himself, the young Japanese superstar that we love so much and have covered so much this season because he gives us so much to talk about. I mean, every day he was delivering something new, whether it was making history on the mound or in the batter's box or even stealing bases. This guy was doing it all this season. And he brought the eyes back to baseball. He brought the money back to baseball. He brought the international fans back to baseball. In my eyes, this is an easy vote. Undeniably, the MVP of the baseball year was Shohei Ohtani, man. So I know there's a couple other guys that we can bring up that had some great seasons. I know we talked about Vlad Jr. earlier in the year, that he's possibly in that conversation as well. But I just don't think with the year that Shohei Ohtani had, on the field, off the field. And like I said, he just did it all, man. We've never seen this done in the likes of baseball. People were bringing up the name Babe Ruth and comparing him to Babe Ruth. I mean, you haven't heard that in a long time. This guy is clearly one of the best players in baseball. He is clearly the best international player in baseball right now. And I think he is the MVP of the league.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, so they just announced the MVP finalists. Shohei has obviously won, You mentioned Vlad Jr. And then Simeon, also the second baseman from Toronto, is also in there. And then on the National League side, you have Bryce Harper, Juan Soto, and Fernando Tatis Jr. What you don't have in any of those MVP finalists is anybody who played in the playoffs. None of those guys' teams made it to the postseason. So, you have, and that was one question marks I had about Shohei was, should the MVP have at least been close to making the postseason? Should they have been fighting for a postseason position? I think if Toronto had gotten into the playoffs, I think you'd have a stronger case for Vlad Jr. because he was that good and he was hitting bombs for Toronto late in the season. But the thing is with Toronto too, you had other great guys in the lineup. Just look at the other MVP finalist, Simeon. And then on top of that, you had Biggio and a few other guys, on that team. Bo Bichette's obviously a good young hitter as well. So you had a pretty stacked lineup. They just signed George Springer last year. He was good as soon as he got healthy. So, it wasn't like Vlad Jr. was doing it all by himself, and they didn't get into the playoffs. Shohei seemed to make the playoffs either, but he was carrying the Angels, hitting the baseball, pitching, and then you got to remember, Mike Trout missed most of the season. So you didn't have this stacked lineup where Shohei was seeing a lot of pitches, teams walked him. He had to kind of earn the kind of numbers he put up, both at the plate and on the mound, because he didn't have as much help as some of these other players did throughout the year. So, the fact that none of these guys were in the postseason, the fact that, Shohei did not play in a stacked lineup where he could kind of, see good pitches and to hit the ball in the ballpark, I'm definitely taking Shohei. I probably would have taken him anyway, but Shohei has to be the MVP in the American League. We're going to find out Thursday night, so next Thursday, the 18th. So we'll have one more show to try to convince everybody that Shohei should be the MVP, although I don't know how much convincing we're going to have to do. He put up such a good year this year.
Man, just go look at his numbers, look at all the coverage, look at all the fans that love him. He is clearly the MVP of the baseball season, man. I just can't see anybody else stacking up against him when you look at everything. And like I said, I mean, he was making history a lot of times this season. I mean, when have you talked about a guy, playing in the outfield, going in the batter's box, on the mound, stealing bases? He was doing it all, man. We even made jokes about how he needed to catch games and start calling games behind the plate because he was doing everything. So I just clearly think he is the best player in baseball and deserves to be the MVP. But let's move on to the final topic tonight, and that's topic number 10. And Jokic ain't yoking, or ain't joking, whatever you want to call it. But he definitely yoked up Markieff Morris or Marcus Morris. I think it was Markieff, right? I mean, Markieff. I get those two mixed up, but I think it was Markieff Morris who had a hard foul himself. So I'm not sure what he was expecting was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the Jokic play first where he went and just drilled Markieff Morris from behind. And I said, Jokic, what are you doing? Like, he's usually pretty calm. I mean, the guy was just the MVP of the league. I was just surprised that he did that. Then you go see another angle and you see what Morris did to Jokic when Jokic was shooting a sort of like a deep three, or I don't even know, it might have even been a half-court shot where Morris sort of undercut him and went for his knee, which was also a cheap shot. So, and the Morris twins have been known to kind of do things like that, not quite to that degree, but still kind of give a little nudge, almost like a Rodney Harrison in the NBA. So we saw that with Morris on that play. Doesn't give Jokic the excuse to go drill him from behind. He could have really hurt Morris. I mean, Morris got a little banged up, but it wasn't as bad as I think initially thought. So it's still a cheap shot from Jokic, but we can see why Jokic was upset by that play. So, and then everything with the bench and Jimmy Butler saying we're going to meet him behind the arena or whatever he was. I mean, it's just the NBA, which I love. I love the NBA. These guys are awesome, but the NBA is full of so many tough guys that they're all going to fight until you actually get to a point where you do have to fight. They did show some of the Heat players standing outside of the locker room after the game. It's what are you guys doing? Do you honestly think you're going to fight Jokic? Now Jokic's two other brothers want to join Nikola and fight the two Morris brothers. It's what nothing's going to happen. This is a social media fight, essentially. But yeah, I mean, Jokic got a 1-game suspension. Morris and Butler were fined. I think those are the correct calls there. But I think we need to stop pointing so much at what Jokic did. If you got to make sure you see what Morris did after seeing what Jokic did before you really have an opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it was like accumulation of events that happened that obviously got to this point. And it was a physical game all around. Like you said, there was that play when Jokic was shooting and Morris hit him. But then on that exact next play was when Morris had the very physical play, clearly basically gives Jokic the forearm shiver at half court when he's trying to make the pass. And then Jokic just kind of loses his mind. We're talking about a guy, remember, and a lot of people are talking about this on the internet, that is from Serbia, right? I mean, and we're not talking about, I know there's been talk that European players are maybe soft over the years and throughout history, but this is not one of them. Nikola Jokic is not one of them. His brothers aren't. They're at every game. People have compared them to being like European, like mafia, like just ready to make a hit at any point now. And I see it, you know what I mean? But they're there defending their brother, and they're here on American soil as international, international star Jokic is, right? So they're here to protect their brother. I totally get it. I do just think it was just one of those things in the NBA. Let's go back to the NBA in the 80s, man, when they were actually fighting and dropping. Let's talk about the Celtics and the Pistons, or, you know what I mean? Like where those were literally real brawls. And then they were like, yeah, we'll still play next game. Nobody was suspended. Nobody was fined. That was the NBA in the 80s. So the NBA now is a lot lighter. They actually don't really fight. I think this is kind of the max of events that you see now in the NBA. And it just, accumulated all these events together to turn out to this big thing. But I think the bigger story is, Jokic's brothers saying, hey, we're ready to do this if you want to bring it, to basically Butler and the two Morris brothers. And so there's been some back and forth on Twitter between all the parties. But I do think the NBA handled it properly by suspending Jokic 1 game. I think if you look back at the history, especially I think most recently the Chris Paul incident, when, Chris Paul got pushed in the back, there was that 1 game suspension there. This is kind of very similar. So the 1 game suspension for Jokic, and then the fines for Morris for the hard foul, which was definitely a flagrant, okay, so not needed in the game. That's not a regular NBA foul, so that was definitely a good fine. And then Butler just went, extra G on it, wanted to escalate the situation even more. He wasn't even part of it, but he's there defending his teammate. I get it. And so they were like, hey, this guy was really trying to escalate the situation into a huge fight even after the game. And so that's why he got fined. So I think the NBA did a good job of handling it. But I don't know. I think this is a topic that is probably going to quickly blow over. But I do think Jokic, as a former MVP, should be getting a little bit more respect across the league because he is one of the best big men in the NBA. So I like both parties here. So I don't know. I don't think this is that big of a story. I think it's a lot funnier, honestly, for the stuff that we've seen after the fight and the comments after the fight, and even producer Ben pulling up some of these funny clips here. With Hezbollah. If you guys don't know Hezbollah on Twitter, that the young little fighter there punching the guy in the face, man, he's a funny guy to follow there, Russian little superstar. But I just think after the jokes have been really funny here, and that's, I guess, why we're saying Jokic ain't joking, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, this is going to blow over in a couple of days. People aren't going to care about it after a while. You're absolutely right about the 80s. I mean, people remember Kevin McHale's clothesline of Kurt Rambis in the NBA Finals. McHale didn't even get suspended. I don't even think he got a technical foul. I think it was just a hard foul. Yeah, just a common foul. So things have changed for the good too. Because guys' careers could get hurt, by doing things like that. And the guys are just bigger, stronger, faster now. So I totally understand why they're doing it. You mentioned it too. The NBA handled it right. They have the suspension, the fine. I'm sure this is going to blow over. It is crazy to see clips of Drago right now, but just definitely, I think this is kind of over and done with here for this fight. But certainly fun to talk about. Our producer Ben Kudo mentioned that we're going to go to the live chat now. We're going to take a look at the live chat. I'm going to squint a little bit because my eyesight is terrible, but Ruzman again tuning in tonight. We really appreciate him checking into our show. As always, just one of our biggest supporters of the show. So always love seeing him on there. So we're going to see some of his comments here. And we'll see if he's got any questions. Doesn't he always blame someone else but
Christian
themselves? I believe he's talking about Horner. I think he's right. I mean, it just seems like it's always somebody else's fault except for Horner's, even though Brandon, I mean, you can speak more on this, but it just seemed like across the board with Red Bull there with the Yuki Tsunoda situation where it was the team that had the communication problem team-wide, and that's on Horner. I mean, he's running the show.
Yeah, I think most recently Christian Horner has kind of looked to too many excuses or looked to shift the blame in a lot of things this season. And I think that's exactly what Ruseman's bringing up. Instead of like, when you're a champion, when you're a championship team, you don't do that. You take it on yourself. You take the responsibility on, and you just get better and you admit your mistakes and you move on instead of trying to shift the blame. I think Christian Horner has done a little bit too much of that this season for most F1 fans liking.
Yeah, no question. Rusman mentioned too that on Netflix, you watch Drive to Survive, and I think you either kind of respect Horner when you watch that show, or you absolutely can't stand him. And a lot of people can't stand him, but you have to have a villain. Horner is really good at what he does. I will say that. So you like rooting against him, but you do have to respect what he does for Red Bull, and that's why they're one of the top teams, and they're in the top spot right now. So again, F1 is going to be crazy down the stretch. This is such a good year to follow, especially the top two guys. So we're going to see how that goes. What 5? Is it 5 races left, Brandon, or 4?
I'm trying to think now. We got Brazil, and then it's 4 now. We got Brazil, then we go to Qatar, then we've got Abu Dhabi, and I'm forgetting one. Austria? But we've got no. We've got 4 left, and 3 of them are in the Middle East. Okay. Gotcha. I'm just forgetting it. Saudi Arabia, the new track, Jeddah. Yeah. That's why I was forgetting it. It's a brand new track that they're introducing in Saudi Arabia. So we go to Brazil this week, then we go to Qatar, whatever you want to pronounce it. Then we go to Saudi Arabia, and then we finish with the normal finale in Abu Dhabi with a new track layout in Abu Dhabi. I will say that should provide some exciting racing.
Yeah, Qatar, it's like Porsche. I mean, tomato. Who knows? Folks, thank you so much for joining us this week on Comeback Sports. Thank you for Ruseman Reese. Always check in on the live chat. Folks, that can be you too. You can jump in on the live chat on YouTube and ask us a question just like Ruseman does all the time. We'll make sure we show that on the show. Also, please subscribe to Comeback Sports. That certainly helps us. And again, our awesome producer, Ben, cuts up all the different segments and feeds it to the Comeback Sports subscription. So that'll just jump right to your subscription page. You don't have to go searching for it. It's just right there for you. And finally, you can call that number that we've been dishing out throughout the show. You can leave a voicemail throughout the week, or next week when we have the show again, you can call in. So make sure you try to do that as well. And finally, you can follow our Twitter handles at the bottom of the screen here at Comeback Sports. Both Brandon and I are on Twitter. You can ask us questions. We also tweet out the link to the show every week, so it's good to follow us there as well. Folks, thanks again for joining us here on Comeback Sports. We'll see you next time.
Ruseman, get your family to follow us.